Okay, we are talking about Unbreakable Motivation. We got Steve and Rob. Rob is joining us this week and hopefully in the future weeks. And we're talking about 6 different points here. First, we're going to recap about what we did last week. We're going to introduce a little bit what we're going to talk about this week. We got the difficulties in productivity, understanding the problem, pattern breaking, action, not results, and sharpening your blade for better results in the future. Rob, you want to say a little bit before we get going here?
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here, and I also want to speak to like the point about why motivation is so hard to maintain over the long term.
Yeah.
I don't think I listened to the last podcast, so I don't know how far you got into it.
Aw, for shame. That's all right though. So we talked about what were the major pitfalls of staying productive. I guess we'll talk about that a little bit more in this one. But we did talk about what are some problems, what are some fixes, but there's always room for more ideas, of course. Not everyone is motivated the same way. Not everyone is sticking to their guns the same way, so it's always good to have more options available in your arsenal to tackle those problems.
Yeah, and I feel like it's kind of like a universal human problem, right? Like motivation is inherently difficult. Like the more I look at it, like where do I need motivation in my life? It's like the areas that I really resist and don't want to be in action.
Yeah.
So like of course motivation dies.
Yeah. And also I think it's more of a thing with the times. As life gets easier, I mean, life always has its struggles and everything, of course, but like it's no longer the feudal ages where like you either do it or you die, or your family is now in poverty. Now it's like, well, I could just stay at my 9-to-5 job and be okay and survive and just live whatever life, or I could be motivated and do something. But like you don't really have the struggle, you don't really have the demons on your tail to make you to force you to do it. Maybe everyone has like kind of a safety net too. And if things really go south, they're like, well, I could always move back home, or I could always just go back to my 9-to-5 job. It's not like, oh, I either do this or my life is over, which is the kind of the fire some people need. I know, like, that helps me. I'm like, oh shoot, that would actually help me stay more motivated, I'm sure.
yeah, for sure. I think you're absolutely right. Like that speaks to the inherently, like there's an issue with the way that we're wired. It's like I can be really motivated if I'm running from a pack of wolves because it's short term. I need to survive, and the repercussions are immediate and painful.
Exactly.
Longer term, like longer term, it's harder to make that choice. If I have to choose between eating chocolate and ice cream right now and having a salad because I want that sexy beach bod, motivation's not going to be there. Unless you learn to work around it. It's like literally pitting 2 parts of your brain against one another. And the older part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, is usually the one that...
Yeah. Exactly. So it's really difficult to, I want to say, especially for maybe the hipsters or millennials especially, that are just trying to figure out their lot in life and how they can be creative and add to the world instead of just going to that survival mode. So I think that's really a good topic for us. Let's go on to the next bit then. Here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, let me shoot. Where did this go? I lost my slides for a second. There we go. Okay, we're good. Okay, so number 1, we're talking about the recap and introduction with what we did exactly last week. So we tried to get people, I guess I'll tell you and the listeners that are new and kind of refresh, because I guess it's good for everyone. For last week, we talked about the tricks and tips that you could do for staying motivated, and we gave a couple answers out there and a couple challenges. And the main challenge of last week was go tell people your goals. Like if you tell people what you're going to do, it makes it more real, versus if you just have an idea in your head and you're not sure you're ever going to do it and it's not really a real thing, you don't really put it out into the universe. You gotta so that's the goal, is to actually go out and say, hey, I'm going to do this, and even get like people to stay on your case about it, and make that support group. So you go out and you tell your goals, and you make it well known, and then you get your support group to keep tabs on you, whether they be friend or foe. Friends, hopefully, that are trying to help you succeed. Foes that you're trying to impress, and all the naysayers, I guess, just to shut them up if that's your motivation that you need, just to get your goal intact. And that works. So that was kind of the gist of last week.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. I feel like we're gonna, at least the subject that I've got in mind today is like similar in that, like, hey, you're gonna get a lot of motivation out of it, but it is different in that like this work tends to deal more with removing obstacles in the way and what gets in the way of that. How do we become more effective? What part of my pattern of behavior can I break in order to make that happen?
Okay.
And I think a lot of it, like, it's like informational stuff is good. It's nice to have, and sometimes I think that like the structure that we're going to discuss here is like why having the information sometimes doesn't, like, I know how to be motivated, I know how to be successful, right? I just work really hard, I do the marketing, I do sales, but like how many of us, what's getting in the way of that? And I think that's a big chunk of what I'd like to cover off on today. How's that feel for you?
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely fine. So next, I guess we can move on to the next bit then. Let's go ahead and talk about those difficulties in productivity that you're talking about.
Sure.
What are all the obstacles that either you face, or I know you work with clients and they don't always do what you say. All you have to do is say, go out and do this, and they say, yeah, okay, and then you're like, every day of the week, and they're like, yeah, okay, and then you check back with them next week, and it's like, well, how'd you do? And they're like, do what? Or they're like, oh, I was really busy, or oh, I was only able to do it one day, and you're like, and then they get on your case and ask you why they're not progressing, and then that's just frustrating.
Sounds like you have some personal experience with that, man.
Yeah. Well, I know, with teaching, they're like, well, why isn't my kid fluent in English? And it's like, well, they practice here 1 hour a week. Do they practice at home? Well, no. And it's like, well, how are they going to learn if they don't practice outside of here? Versus the ones that do practice. And then it's like, well, they're just smarter. No, they put in the work.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like what patterns show up for the people that I work with that don't do the work. And more often than not, it's like, it's because I don't want to comes up.
Yeah.
And
or they want to during the session, and then after the session's done, they're like, the magic dies, and then... Yeah, and I think that speaks to like the core of it, right? Like, hey, it's really easy to be inspired when I'm working with a professional in the moment. I've just been to a Tony Robbins seminar, but then, as you said, the magic dies, and now what the fuck do? I'm back to the way it was before. Exactly.
And but what I see a lot is like, okay, I feel resistance towards doing this thing. That's why I'm trying to get motivated. But why am I? And being able to explore that is so difficult. Like, why am I not approaching women when I want to get a date? Well, for a lot of people, it's because they're fucking terrified of what it would look like if they got rejected by a pretty girl or a girl that they found attractive. So it doesn't matter how motivated they are in the moment until they break out of that. Just can't. Fear is going to overpower any I've had. And it'll do it again and again, and it's unearthed. And
I think you cut out a little bit.
Oh, okay. What part did I cut out of?
Being rejected by a pretty girl was the last I heard.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's cool. But I mean, as I think about that, like as I remember how I was back in my 20s, like the one thing that kept me from dating like stunning women was that fear of like what would happen if a stunning woman shot me down in public. Oh my god, fuck, I'm never doing that. And so like I'd be able to force myself to have conversations with them from time to time, but it was always like with that fear in the background. So it's uncomfortable for both of us.
Yeah.
And what I see a lot with clients is like, hey, until that fear, that irrational fear is really addressed, there's no room for any other behavior. I will always react that way to that problem, and I will always lose motivation until I really understand what's up.
Yeah, if you get stuck in your habits, and it takes a long time to break a habit, which is what we're going to talk about in point number 4 today. But like, yeah, if you keep doing the same thing, you become a habit of your own creation, and you are what you, not only what you. It's not only you are what you eat, but you are what you practice. You are what you do, and if you want to break out of a cycle, you got to do something new. You got to break out of your comfort zone. You got to get a little bit uncomfortable to see the growth that you want to see. And I want to say that's what everyone's afraid of, or that's a big hurdle, a big fear. People like to stay with what they know, what they are good at, what they are comfortable with. And if they, for one day, are outside of their box, it's really terrifying for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think you hit on like a really good point there about like being outside of the box and the discomfort that creates. For me, it shows up like really viscerally. Like I will feel like pain or kind of ill or uncomfortable or sweaty or really and as I'm experiencing that, like I begin to associate that with my reality. Like this situation, me being in pursuit of my goal, is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways I'm creating this experience of, oh, well, when I'm trying to lose weight, when I'm trying to approach beautiful, it sucks. I feel embarrassed. I don't like doing this thing. When in reality, it's just kind of like the body reacts, and I'm putting a story on top of it.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I feel like the first step here is also like, can I be with the emotions and experiences and sensations that come up? Can I just stop and examine them? Like see what's okay. I'm afraid. I'm a little worried that I'm gonna look like an idiot. And like, hey, I'm concerned that I'm not good looking enough. Like own them and notice what body sensations are. Am I really, really tense around my shoulder? Can I loosen that up a little bit?
Yeah.
Like, can I feel my throat seizing up? And as we go through that process, that story can begin to dissolve, and we see like, oh, actually, I just feel sort of uncomfortable. And if I sit with it for long, it'll disappear, and then I can have that conversation.
Yeah, and through a little breathing exercise, or a little even like momentary self meditation, you can unlock certain things and undo the tension that you're feeling, and then you just check in with yourself, and that becomes, the more you do it, of course, the more natural it happens, and then you're able to do those second nature, and really focus on actually what you want to do instead of focusing on little habits. There was a story I heard that there was a guy that was terrified of social situations, and he went and talked to a therapist about it, and the therapist got down to like some kind of ingrained issue with this guy, and one of them was, the guy, he asked, okay, well, when you walk in a room, what is the first thing you see? And the guy said hair, and he said, what, hair? And so it turns out this guy was bald, and it was his insecurity about being bald, and so he's focusing on everyone's hair. Even though this guy was probably just fine as a bald dude, he looked probably fine. The one thing he focuses on is his insecurity about being bald. And so as soon as you own that, and you're like, well, I am a bald dude, or even if you want to make a change with it, you get a toupee or something, even still, the fact that you're focused on hair is going to ruin your whole experience. And for any of us that are listening, or even me, I'm sure we all have insecurities like this. It's not necessarily like I'm not focused on hair because that's never been an issue with me, but I'm sure I have other insecurities that would take the place of that, where this guy wouldn't even like think of those, and I'm just like, oh man, yeah, that's a big deal for me. Can't think of any case in point right now, but yeah, like that is what are your holdups, and if you analyze them and actually attack them rather than say, oh, there's something wrong, I just don't like it, then that's another step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up because this is reminding me of a client that I was working with, and
was this guy bald? I have to ask.
not a bald man. That's a fairly good-looking woman in like the UK. Like,
oh, okay.
She reminded me of. She kind of looks like Gal Gadot's sister, but like the thing is that like she doesn't believe that at all. Like, going into any situation, her belief is that she's not attractive, and that causes her to like lash out when people comment about her looks, because it's like, oh, you're beautiful, and she's like, fuck you, because she doesn't believe it, so this person must be making fun of her or something. This person, yeah, like they're being disingenuous because she's not, so she can't take that from anyone, which makes it really hard for her to date people, right? Like that's just a ticking time bomb waiting to happen.
Right, as soon as the guy compliments her, she's just on the next guy and say, oh, well, I can't spend time with this guy anymore.
Boom, yeah, it can't be done, and it's going to happen. Inevitably, it's going to happen.
Yeah, right. Everyone gives compliments usually, or generally. Yeah, like generally. I'm sure there's got to be a couple people out there that have never paid a compliment to anyone.
Yeah,
she just has to find one of those. Just kidding. Yeah.
Right, just someone who's constantly insulted, but she can't be with that either. And so, like, as we were diving into this. Right. But like I think that's kind of like the cool part, right? Well, not the cool part, but it's interesting seeing it, because at this point, what kind of relationships are available to her? Well, people who don't compliment her. So is that people who aren't attracted to her? Like, that's who you're left to date? And what's nuts about this and is that as we were diving deeper into the story of like, hey, why do you think you're not attractive? She was like, well, my nose. And it was like, what about I had it surgically altered because it reminded me of my dad. It was too big. And her dad walked out on her when she was like 6.
Oh, man. So,
like, just devastated. And her takeaway, I guess, from this encounter was that she was not pretty enough. She was not good enough as a child in order to keep a man around. So, like,
oh, man.
Every time someone leaves, it just reinforces her story that I'm not good enough. And so, like, to your earlier point about, like, hey, there's always something there in the background, whether it's because I'm bald, I'm too fat, I'm too short, I'm too skinny, I'm just not attractive enough. Those patterns really begin to define what we can and can't do. And they're so heavily tied in with motivation. So, like, super happy that.
Yeah. Yeah, so difficulties in productivity. You got to get out of your own way. It's the moral of that.
Yeah, exactly. And more often than not, it will come from something where we failed, like group projects, I don't know, college, I'm not sure, did someone drop out? But there's always going to be one experience where we learn that, hey, I suck at this, and I'm going to continue to suck at this. I'm not good enough to do this. I can't do this. And that's where motivation goes out the window. As soon as we find the first sign that is true, the story comes back into place, and a lot of us will just quit.
Yeah.
Which I think is like a really good transition to the next part.
Yeah, so we're understanding the problem in a second. I want to say one more thing about this before we go on, though, is to get out of your own way, it's not necessarily like the problem is all you and you are the one to find the solution alone. Obviously, a lot of people have these kind of holdups. I would say more often than not, people have these holdups. But the trick is to get beyond them. And whether you need a therapist or a friend or to tell yourself affirmations every day, like, it doesn't matter what you need, but to find out, like, hey, there is something I can work on. and then to seek the help or to do the work again, to be motivated to do the work, to make that happen, to get out of your own way and make your life an easier thing to lead, I guess. I don't know what verb to use there.
No, that's totally valid. I think I see this all the time, right? Like, because I think the natural inclination, at least for me, is like, fuck you, I don't need help on this. I'll solve it myself. Like, that's why self-help is a thing. That's why we're all on YouTube looking for stuff about how to fix certain things about ourselves.
Oh yeah, man.
But you're absolutely right. Right? Like, the reason why the problem persists is because we've been doing it alone. And if I continue to rely on the input of just me, how likely am I going to be to repeat what I've done in the past? 100%, right? That's how I've always done it.
Exactly. That's all you can do. That's all you know. So there's got to be an outside influence to change it up.
Yeah, that was freaking, brilliant. It has to be, it can't be a me thing. It has to be an us.
Yeah, and that's also kind of, I think, the dynamic that the world is understanding. You can't do it alone anymore. People are always talking about like the one engineer, but these projects that people are getting into, making video games, for example, used to be a one-person thing. Opening a restaurant used to be a one-person thing. Making the newest toy or gadget or something, it was a one-person thing. And now you need a corporation. You need a team of 20, 30, 50, 100 people to make it work, to make the dream come to reality. It's insane about the level of cooperation that needs to happen. And if you're going in the game thinking I can do it all by myself, you already lost, I think, in most cases.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, this keeps getting juicier. That's something my dad told me too. Like he's founded his own company back in his 20s, and then he sold it like early when he was in his 40s and retired. And what he was telling me was that the dynamic of the market is exactly as you were describing it. It moves too fast now compared to back when he was first starting up.
Oh, sure.
Like he had 2 people, right? And that was enough. And he built a company out of it. But now the entire team has to be there. I need VC. Like I need my entire team. I need a board of directors, and it's got to be ready to go from like day one. Otherwise, I have no chance of succeeding. So I think that's a remarkable parallel for like what's going on here.
Yeah.
But whether it's business or my personal life or my health, I need people around me to keep me accountable so that this can happen efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, and like if this trend continues into the future, like imagine instead of needing like 100 people or 1,000 people, like it moves on to 10,000, it moves on to 1 million people in a company. That would be absolutely bonkers. Where you make the world making products for itself. That would be absolutely insane. And you would get not only like even a country, but like a continent of people working together to make one product that everyone could benefit from. That would be a global a global trend. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Reformation, I guess.
Yeah, that would be.
It's kind of utopian, I guess, but that would be absolutely insane.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of the path to it. Like that level of creation and collaboration, amazing.
Oh, we got a comment by Kato saying, "Can you at least do it by yourself, and then after you get the foundation going, you can get more people?" So
cutting in and out. Something about
we have
the foundation and then do it with more people.
Yeah, can you at least do the foundation work by yourself? Can you start by yourself? Or before you even set your first step, do you need someone else?
I would say it depends on what the foundation is and what the goal is, what's being created.
Yeah, I would say at least for building the foundation and you're trying to do the research, I think you can start by yourself. At least get the ball rolling by yourself. And then as soon as it gets a little traction, then you got to start finding other people to cooperate and collaborate with. And also, it's good to get people's perspectives anyway. Like, even if it's just a friend and you say, here's my idea. What do you think? And they say, oh, you might want to change this, you might want to change that. Even if they're not your employee and you're not paying them, just to get some other insight, to get some other viewpoint into your project, that would probably be beneficial.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's absolutely possible to start building the foundation alone, but my God, it's so much more efficient when you start bringing in other people. Because I think the primary benefit is that they just don't think the way that I do. So that opens up so many doors. Like if I even bring on like one other person, like the project takes on a life of its own. There's something about that, like that collaborative energy that kind of sparks more and more, and things build faster and faster. If I'm by myself, it's hard for me to get real stoked about like what I'm up to. It just kind of feels like a bunch of tasks. But if I'm working with Steve, like we can get stoked off of what the other person is bringing in. That rapidly turns into this huge, amazing, inspiring project.
Yeah. And I wanted to say also, if you are afraid to show anyone your ideas, you got to get over that hurdle real fast. Because if you're going to make a product or anything that is ever going to be viewed by anyone else, you need other people's feedback pronto, immediately. Because you need the feedback. You need to know where to improve from the get-go. Otherwise, you might be in the wrong direction for a while. So get a few different viewpoints, not just your best friend, but a couple, even people that don't really know you that well, just to look at the product and really give you their insight.
Yeah, agree.
And that could be any goal. It doesn't have to be an actual like company or anything, but like if you wanted to do a like recently I ran 10K, right? So I wanted, and I told people I was going to do it, and how I was working on it, and then after that I kind of just gave up. But I got my goal down, which is the important part for me anyway. But you make it real, you get people's views. I was talking to a guy at work that used to run cross country in high school, and he was giving me pointers and making sure I was stretching okay and maintaining my stamina and everything, and that was cool. So, we spent a lot of time on this section. Now we can go on to number 3, understanding the problem. Well, let's jump there. Let's keep going. Otherwise, this video is going to be like 3 hours. Okay, understanding the problem.
I think we covered off on understanding the pattern, right? Like we were just talking about that.
Yeah, but okay. So you want to do a recap of it? You want me to do it, just to say we did it?
Yeah, sure. I'll do the recap.
Okay.
I think the gist of what we discussed is like looking into where the resistance is. Where am I stopping myself from doing the actions that I need to reach the goal that I want? Like if I'm out to run a marathon, why am I stopping myself from going out of a run? And really looking, it's not just that I don't wanna, like 9 times out of 10, it's going to be another reason. It's not just a lack of motivation. It's because I'm worried how I'm going to look in my like tiny shorts as I run and sweat profusely going up a hill.
Oh my God.
I think that I'm too fat to do it. Right?
Get out of my head.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it that, it just sucks too bad. It hurts. And when I try to run a mile, I'm embarrassed because I can't. And I'm out of breath after half a mile. And beginning to see, like, am I just being too critical of myself? Can I let that go and just give myself an easier goal so that I can at least get something out of the way? I can move one baby step closer to my goal.
Yeah.
Understanding the pattern is really, really important.
Yeah. And another thing is just to let yourself be vulnerable a little bit. Don't be afraid. Everyone has their own holdups, their own problems, and if people laugh, just say, well, you know what, I'm doing what I need to do for me, and it's not hurting anyone, I hope. In your goals, hopefully your goals aren't going to hurt anyone in the process, and you just got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, I think that's super critical too. Like, I find that for me personally, it's really easy to get stopped in trying to look good, and that goes for like the rock climbing that I do, that goes for like putting out, even promoting my own business. Sometimes I get stopped because like I don't want to look like I'm bragging, but it's all in the space of trying to look good, and that's killer for me. I absolutely paralyzed at times.
Sure.
And being able to stop and recognize it is helpful for choosing another way.
Yeah. Cool, that'll work for that. Let's do pattern breaking, trying to get out of the pattern that we have set. So we talked a little bit about this already, like getting an outside influence is really useful. Finding a friend, finding a support group. We talked even a little bit last week about how you can find your enemies and tell them, look, I'm going to do this, and maybe they're gonna laugh at you and say, "There's no way you're gonna do this." But then if you're like, "Dude, if you remind me every day," and then they will love to be on your case, especially if you make the deal with them, and you say, "If you remind me every day, and I do not do my goal by this time, by this day, and you remind me every day to do my goal, and I have not done it, I will give you $100 or $10 or whatever it is, or I will buy you lunch or something like that." So that gets them a little bit motivated to be on your case. And then also, if you are the ripple in the pond that starts the chain of events, and you are successful, then your enemies might be like, "Oh, this guy was I didn't think this guy could do it, but he did it. I'm better than him," because of course they are, right? And then they will try to do the same thing you're doing, and maybe they will succeed, maybe they will fail, but at least they're starting to mold their own lives the way they want to do that too. So you could be motivational for people all over the world, even if they're not in your social circle.
Yeah, I like that. Like you're talking about like looking into the ripples of what you're up to. So if I do this thing, how would it positively impact not only just my immediate friends, but in my sharing this, is there someone across the world who's going to be a little bit inspired because I did that thing?
Yeah, the community could benefit. Doesn't matter who, what, when, where, or how. It's just keep growing. And so if you get your friends in on it too, then of course people want to see you succeed. And if you have like a friendly wager with your friend and say, "Well, if I haven't done it yet, then I'll buy you lunch, and if I do it, or if I do it, I'll buy you lunch to say thank you. If I don't, then I'll buy you lunch for a week or something, just to make it more worth their while."
Yeah.
So
I think what I'm hearing, is creating enough of a reward or punishment such that if I do the action, it's going to feel way more amazing than if I fail at the action. Like I'm going to have some crazy punishment, motivation or motivational inertia, such that I have to take action if I want to like feel awesome about myself. Like, so either the punishment is too great, it's greater than the effect of whatever the worst case scenario is for what I'm up to. So for instance, if I'm about approaching women, then maybe I give a check to my friend for like $2,000 and like, "You donate this to Justin Bieber if I don't talk to this."
Oh,
well,
man.
I'm gonna go talk to the girl, right?
Oh man. Yeah, if that doesn't motivate you, nothing will. Jeez.
Yeah. But I think that speaks to a larger point of like finding systems for where I reliably fail. If I'm out to code a new program, where do I burn out? Well, maybe when it comes to debugging, I get so frustrated and be like, "Fuck it," and I quit the. So how do I build a system or accountability so that when that happens, I have something that will reliably get me out of that space? And I think what you were bringing up are really good examples of that.
Which ones particularly? Which examples? Which examples do you mean?
Like sharing with friends, having them hold you to what you said you do, making sure that you share it with the rest of the world, right? Like, because sometimes I just need that little pellet of motive. So in sharing what I'm up to, I get a bunch of likes. I get people that tell me that they're inspired or moved. And sometimes that's enough to keep me going.
Yeah.
And other times, like if I tell my friends that I'm going to run a marathon by May, they're going to follow up with me and be like, "How's that training going?" And not to be jerks about it, but they're just going to follow up because they're my friend. And
yeah, sure.
That push will sometimes be enough to keep me going.
Yeah. Yeah, after I stopped running, I had friends that would message me like after a week or two and be like, "Are you still running?" And that was kind of cool. I was like, "Oh, you're keeping tabs on me. You want to make sure I'm still keeping up and everything." And like the answer was no, but I was like, and they're like, "Oh, well, what else are you up to?" And I was like, "Well, here are my new goals." And they were now keeping me on tabs for those, which is really cool. So they're out to see me succeed. I think I should be more polite and say, "Well, what are your goals? What are you interested in?" And keep tabs on them and kind of return the favor. But maybe all in due time, I guess. But
let's just keep talking about me.
Thanks for the help. See ya.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think if like more structures come to mind. Can you think of like a goal where you feel like you're reliably?
Reliably what? Sorry, you cut out.
I guess my connection must be real bad. I was asking if you could think of a goal where you're reliably stopped at a specific point, or there's a pattern to where you tend to like fall off the wagon.
Kind of what you were talking about before with the programming thing. Like every so often I'll write a program and I'll get far enough into it and I'm like, nah, I need to stop here. And it's not necessarily the debugging. It's kind of I wonder if it's not necessarily graphics, because I don't think I even get that far, but it's trying to do stuff I don't quite understand. And I think the answer would just be do more tutorials, stick through it with like learning Unity and C# and everything like that, and putting it all together. And I think in my mind I can think of like the process to get out of that slump, but that's kind of where I get stuck. And it's frustrating when you spend a couple hours on a program and you make like seriously 20 seconds of progress. And it's so slow going. And I know like if you were to do it every day and keep practicing, you would be able to do that 20 seconds in 20 seconds. But the first time is so slow. It's just kind of unbearable. So the next day I'm like, oh, I can do more on that. And then I never get around to it. And then one day turns into 2 days and 3 days and a week.
Got it. So I think what I'm hearing is that like when it comes to like especially picking up a new language and coding, in the beginning it's just so goddamn slow and like it feels like you're not making progress.
Yeah.
That like it's really easy to lose motivation, just drop it.
Right. Yeah, and learning a language like Chinese and stuff, like I will be really good for a month, and then after the month is done, I'll get distracted by something else, and then returning to my previous schedule is just so difficult. Because I think I'll do one day here or one day there, and then it just never goes back to every day with hours of devoted time like it was before. And of course, if you don't practice it, you just lose it. So kind of go back to square one.
Yeah. That actually makes me really curious. Was there ever a time when you were picking up something new and it wasn't like a slog through the swamp, like and it was actually like sexy and exciting?
Oh man, music theory, man, was like always my jam. I never remember slogging through music theory, which makes it really strange when I teach it, because I'm just like, of course it makes sense. It's just like this. It's so logical to me now that I don't remember it ever being difficult. And I remember finding some papers from college or even high school where I was doing like exams and I got stuff wrong, and I looked at it, I'm like, how could I get this wrong? But so obviously there must have been some kind of schedule, some kind of struggle. But I woke up one day and I was just like, I know music theory. I don't remember ever not knowing it. So I guess that is a good example. Where it was so logically presented to me that I didn't even really have. It seemed like I didn't even have to try. But obviously I had to at least put some effort in, because how did I learn it otherwise, right?
Got it. So I think what I'm hearing is that the difference between music theory, learning that, mastering it, and learning a new language is that you had that information presented to you in a really logical way.
Yeah.
It just made sense.
Yeah, I don't know what my teachers did. I don't know, because I had a couple music theory teachers where I was just like, you're out of your mind. But for whatever reason, maybe I just had a really good teacher for it at the time. I don't know.
Interesting. So, like, I'm wondering then if maybe the system for being, like, excited about learning a new language is finding someone who speaks their language, who happens to know that particular set of, like, code, syntax, or whatever, and having them walk through, just, like, asking for help. Like, would that serve?
Yeah, but I mean, finding a teacher, especially later in life, is so difficult. There are communities and stuff, but it's like you get one person and you're either paying like private fees that are just emptying your pocketbook, or you get someone that's completely unreliable and they'll talk to you like once every month or something if you're lucky.
Got it. Yeah, and I think this is like the perfect example of like why so many of us are like reluctant to ask for help. Because like if I do, am I going to get incompetent help? Is it going to cost me an arm and a leg?
Yeah. Yeah, and then like tutorial series are good, but the tutorial series are a kind of a one-size-fits-all, and they're not good enough to really be a reliable source for anyone to go from point A to point B and find the pitfalls that they do and cope with those. It's just gonna go on one train of thought and continue through the whole tutorial series. And if you learn, great, and if you don't, then there's another one you could try, but you're gonna have the same issue probably until you find exactly the one that's built right for you, but that's probably non-existent. So, but then people teach themselves anyway through that way, and if you find enough tutorials and enough of them make sense to you, you'll learn the same. You'll learn the topic, whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, what I found is that, like, I won't ever hire a teacher, but usually I can find a friend of a friend who's willing to sit down and spend at least some time with that. And if they're friends with my friend, that means that they must communicate in a similar way. Like, I can at least vibe out with this person a little bit.
Oh, sure.
And so, yeah. So that's what I've been using to get past my hurdles. And I'm not sure if that serves you at all, but like, I found that to be really helpful. And it's free. And I get to feel like I'm reaching out of my shell a little bit because, like, that's uncomfortable. I don't like asking for help. So even asking for help is kind of a little victory.
Well, you got the social network there that really helps you out, right? So as long as you have those connections to help find you. I mean, if you're living like abroad, for example, and you don't know many people at all, like my social circle is probably my coworkers and a few people that I've met along the way, but my social circle is kind of small. And anyone I talk to is usually online now, especially if I'm not at work. So trying to expand and trying to find teachers, and also the things I want to learn seem like they're so niche. They're like, it's not a mainstream thing. It's like, I want to learn how to program this one thing for that one thing. And obviously there's like a bunch of tutorials on it, but finding someone that's actually competent among my social network of people that are able to sit down and actually, it's really difficult to find that one person. Or all the people that I could learn Chinese from, they're not teachers. they're just not, and they're like, oh, Chinese is easy, I speak it already, so here, this is how, and they just never taught it before. So their teaching methods aren't gonna be useful.
Yeah, I got that. And so again, really perfect. I think I fall into the same bucket, right? Like, when I'm looking for a solution, I'm also like really busy constructing my own obstacles for that. Well, I should do sales calls to bring on more clients. Oh no, people just shoot me down. Oh no, I don't have a script set up. And you want, like, I think for anyone who's listening to this right now, like, part of breaking out of your patterns is to be aware of when that pattern starts showing up and telling you the same story over and over again. Is my brain creating obstacles that don't really exist? In some cases, they're real, right? There's no denying that.
Yeah, sure.
Other times, and other times, like, it might just be in our heads. And I think to your example, like, I 100% believe you in that you have a bunch of people in your life that, like, they speak Chinese and they're bad at teaching it because they're just grown up with it.
Or they know how to speak, they know how to teach Chinese to Chinese kids or Chinese speakers, but they don't know how to teach it to a foreigner, which is much more difficult.
Yeah, but like I would challenge that, like, out of all of their networks, there would be at least one person who would be interested in practicing with you that is actually pretty talented at teaching Chinese to foreigners.
Sure. Yeah, but the trick is then finding that person, and also setting up our schedules. Yeah. Everyone is so busy.
Yeah, and it's exactly that process. It's finding the breakdown, solving the breakdown, finding the breakdown, solving the breakdown. And I think that's kind of what's missing from, like, a lot of motivational stuff. It's like, no, just watch this video. After 30 minutes, you'll be motivated forever. And it's like, nope, that's not how motivation works.
Yeah.
It's constantly picking myself up again after I've failed and failed and failed. And eventually I build some mastery so this can stop.
Yeah, even several times a day in some cases. Oh, failed again. Gonna get lunch and then try again.
Yeah, and I think it's so natural for me to, like, beat myself up over it, which I think is even less motivating. Because, like, now, not only have I failed at my goal, I'm like a failure as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if you keep failing, then you're like, oh my god. I heard something a little motivational recently that said a lion when they, or I guess a lioness because they're the ones that are hunting, but like they go out and hunt and their catch rate is so bad. It's like 1 out of 10. They fail 90% of the time. And they said if a lion can fail, I don't know if this is actually true, but it worked for the point anyway. If a lion can fail 9 out of 10 times, and they're like one of the biggest predators on the face of the earth, like you're doing okay. You can ask that girl out.
Yeah. Actually, that's reminding me of something that I heard from a friend of mine. Actually, he's a mutual friend. Both you and I know him, Steve.
Okay.
And like, I'm not Christian. I'm not religious at all. But like,
that friend
really landed for me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that friend. And it was like even Jesus lost one. It's like even this like purported like perfect example of a human being still fucked it up.
Wow.
And so, yeah, sometimes part of motivation is just being willing to extend that little bit of grace and mercy to ourselves. Yeah, we fucked it up, but that's life. You know, that's part of learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do I do better next time?
Yeah. Yeah. Pick the pieces up. Forgive yourself. A lot of people have a hard time doing that. They're like, well, I'm not good enough for that. And you tell yourself all these things. And if you do, then it's going to maybe become true for you. And it gets that much harder to dig yourself out of that hole.
Yeah, guilt is killer. Like making ourselves wrong for failing is like just as bad as like any other breakdown. Like I think that's been like a source of more paralysis to me than any other thing. Like the fact that I'm just beating myself up constantly when I don't reach the goal that I set out for myself, which is actually a pretty good transition to the next subject, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we can move on. Let's go for actions and not results. Go ahead and continue your point there.
Yeah, I love this part.
Sure.
Like, okay, so I'm gonna spit out a bunch of things that I think are true, but like it's not reality how I view it. But so I think what happens is that when we set up goals for ourselves, for me personally, I see it as like I haven't achieved my goal. I haven't achieved my goal. I haven't achieved my goal. Up until the very point that I achieve it. But then that's a very temporary victory. And at that point, I need to achieve another goal. So there's actually no room for me to be a winner here. Like besides for the split second where I actually reach the goal that I set.
Oh man. Uh-huh.
So one thing that I found really helpful is like I can have the goal, but what I'm really focusing on is like actions that I can reliably take. So it's not how many clients can I land by Thursday, it's how many calls can I make? Can I do 10? Because I can do that, and that's a victory for me. I'm focusing on the action steps and not like how much I'm failing at reaching my client.
Mm-hmm.
Way more motivating. What are your thoughts about that? Because I know like kind of everyone has their different take on it.
Wow. Yeah, I totally relate to that where you do one thing and you're like, hey, what's next? And I feel like if I stop to smell the roses and even celebrate a little bit, I'm like, well, I'm wasting time from achieving my next goal. And I'm not putting the effort there. But that all being said, I was actually, my work provided a Tony Robbins seminar training thing for just our group, which was really cool, a really small group. But this guy just like came from a 3-day Tony Robbins thing. He's been doing motivational stuff and being productive for years. And he shared with us what he was talking about. And he was like, once you achieve a goal, you got to celebrate. And it's not just like, woo, I did it. But you got to like buckle down, fall to your knees and really celebrate. Like, how happy are you? You did something. You set out your, you've been planning this for however long you've been planning it. But you actually achieved it. You're done. Like you accomplished your goal. And if you can't celebrate and get happy about that, like, why are you living? What is your motivation to even do this? If it's not a big deal that you achieve this goal, even if it's a simple thing, make your bed every day for a week. Like, even it doesn't matter how small it is, but if you set out to do something to change your life, again, that goes back to what we were saying about how if you're a creature of habit, we're all creatures of habit. So if you keep doing the same negative thing that you don't like about yourself every day, and then you change that, even if you change that behavior for a week, that's amazing. and you should celebrate accordingly. And it's okay to actually give yourself that time and space to do that.
Yeah, that one really hits home for me. I remember there was a time in my life where things got really dark, dude. Like, life really felt like there's no purpose, and like if I was gone, like it would really make that much of a difference because at least I would be done suffering.
Right.
And one of the things that I really saw for myself that helped me get out of that space was I really wasn't taking the time to acknowledge myself for the stuff that I was doing right. I was so focused on where I was lacking and how far away I was from my giant goals that I built up for myself that like I really couldn't be like happy with who I was. And that still shows up for me, right? Like it's not something that I fully managed to master, but like being aware that there's an impact when we don't stop to like take a look and acknowledge like how far we've come along, because it fucking hurts to be inadequate all the time, to be short of a goal all the time. The cost is like sometimes that's mental health, sometimes that's the will to live.
Yeah, that can be really detrimental on oneself. And if you feel like you haven't achieved your goal, you're like, well, I'm just not that good of a person, and that's just a terrible mindset, I would say. I heard of I forget where I heard this actually, but there was a woman that was talking about how when she introduces her friends at parties, she no longer says, oh, he works at McDonald's or he's a CEO at this place. It doesn't matter what they do for a living. She would tell them about like an actual characteristic about this person. Like, oh, this is my friend Rob. He's a great listener, and whenever I have a problem, he's a great person to talk to. And he helps support me in many different ways. Or like you tell about a story that involved them as a person, not about their job, not about what they do outside of who they are, but talk about their actual characteristics and what makes them your friend. Why are you associated with them? What do you like about them? What makes them a meaningful relationship and person to you in your life? And if you start introducing people like that, you start thinking about them like that, and you say, well, it doesn't matter that they work a minimum wage job. It doesn't matter that they're working 10 jobs. I mean, that shows that they have a lot of perseverance, and they're able to do that where a lot of people probably could not. So I think that's a better way to think about it. And going back to what you said, don't focus on the negative, focus on the positive.
Yeah. What have I actually done, and how can I stop and acknowledge myself for this?
Yeah.
I think hearing what you were just talking about, like it kind of makes me curious. Like how often do we actually stop and like could I extend that same sort of courtesy to myself? Like I'm not a software engineer, I am not a professional relationship coach, but like here's what I actually value about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and I think for a lot of men, there's like this resistance to any sort of thing like that because it feels like weak. It feels like, why would I do that to myself? And then you have to question, like, is that my attitude towards myself all the time? Is it always no mercy?
Yep.
And yeah, for me, the answer is yes. And yeah, I can be super compassionate for other people, but I never extend that towards me because I don't deserve it yet. I haven't hit that goal yet.
Yeah. Something you missed about last week is my brother told me how to make a Trello board back in the day, or like a year ago, and so I found that online. And you make 3 categories: what you need, what you want to do, what you're doing right now, and what you have already done. And after a week or a month or two about using this, I got to a point where my to-do list was quite busy. My current work list was progressive, and the final list of what I've already done was just getting so long, and I'm like, I don't even look at that, I don't even use it. What do I use that for? Why don't I just throw done items away and clear that space, and then I don't even have to look at it? And my brother responded, because I was like, well, what is this for? I get the other 2, but like this one doesn't mean anything. And the answer to that was, you ever have days where you're feeling like you're not accomplishing anything? Where the world is against you and all that stuff, and you're not a progressive person and you haven't stayed motivated or anything. That's what that list is for days like that, when you have those right? So then you look at that list and you're like, oh my god, I actually am a decent person. I can keep going. I can do this. I am making a difference. And so that's what that was for. And I thought that was really, really cool. So that list stayed on my Trello board for forever. Forever after.
Yeah, shoot, man. I think we're already bleeding into the next subject. That's like the perfect transition right there.
Yeah. We're doing okay on time. We got like 6 minutes before the hour's up anyway, so or 5 minutes before the hour's up.
Okay.
So yeah, let's keep going. Sharpen your blade.
Yeah.
I got a beautiful picture of a cutting board with a knife and peppers, fiery red peppers.
Yeah. Yeah. What was I gonna say here? Oh yeah. I feel like knife sharpening is like one of my favorite things. It's basically like a hobby of mine, but it's also kind of the serial killer of hobbies.
You mean like physically? You mean you're not like making a metaphor. You mean actually sharpening actual knives, right?
No, not relevant to this subject, but yeah, that's more of an aside.
Okay.
With regards to this one, the story that comes to mind for me is like you're like there's this woodcutter and like he's just like hacking away at this tree, and like he's like, I gotta get through like 10 logs, otherwise like I won't be able to feed my family. So he's going the first tree, easy, right? Yeah. Not a problem. He's cutting through like a couple of minutes and he's done. The tree is over. He moves on to the next tree. And he's noticing that his knife, like his axe is getting duller and duller. And it's like a lot more work now. It's swinging with the same amount of force. He's been doing this for a long time. It's not cutting his feet, but he's still going, right? Like I'm pressed for time. I can't stop. Like I have a whetstone over there. I could probably do something about it, but no. Like
I don't have time.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Knocks down the second tree. The third tree, he's like, now it's like using a hammer. He's like hacking into the wood and just making dents. And this is where we usually stop the story, and it's like, where in your life are you forgetting to sharpen your blade? Like, how often in your routine are you so consumed with getting to the next tree or accomplishing the next task that you aren't giving yourself the time to breathe and re-hone your tools so that you can be efficient at what you're doing?
You got to keep
There's a lot of times I think, like, if I'm not making progress, if this is a slog the entire way through, to your point earlier, how am I going to be motivated about it? This feels like shit. I'm using a hammer on a tree right now.
Wow.
So, yeah. And what does that look like for you, man? Like, I kind of don't want to monopolize the talking time here, so like I'm curious what you do.
No, so let's go back to the learning Chinese example. I do the same book, and I guess that's also where you get burned out too, because you're doing the same thing over and over. Even your mind in a subconscious level is getting a little dulled out because you're like, oh, this again. I already did this before, but the patterns are still there, and it's still like it's good practice that you're doing it every day, but you got to switch up your routine here and there to keep it interesting, to keep it fresh, to keep your mind flexible in learning, I would say.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, but yeah, so I feel like, oh, I know a perfect example. When I was running way before, and I think I got out of this too, was when I was running, I would run too much at a time. I feel that's like a physical process of using the axe too many times. And I would get shin splints, and my legs I would have to stop for like a couple of weeks before my legs would feel good enough to run again. And so then of course I would burn out and not be able to run anymore. But this time around I was much more successful because I ran more often, but I ran less. Before I was running like 5K like to practice, right? When I was trying to get better at it, I was running 5K like 2 or 3 times a week. But because it was so high intensity at a time, I was getting shin splints and other things, and I wasn't stretching properly. This time around, I was running like a K or 2 every day, 6 days a week or so, and at the start, and I was able to build on that and stretching a lot and everything like that. But the fact that I took it slower and gave myself some breathing time, again with the upkeep, that really helped me achieve my goal. And it goes back to the whole slow and steady wins the race. the old adage about that. If you try to race till the end, you're gonna trip up. You're gonna fail. Versus if you're slow, you keep your pace. You make sure you're doing everything you need to do. You stop to smell the flowers. You stop to ask your friends for advice and questions. You'll probably see the finish line, the victory of your goal, much easier. If you stop to sharpen your axe.
I think that's a beautiful analogy. Like, and there's literally, I think, a running method out there where you run for a while and then you like walk for an equal amount of time, and then you run,
right,
and then you walk. And it's been proven that that methodology is more reliable for getting people to break through their personal records than anything else. Like,
wow,
you can train all you want, but like using this method where you actually stop and give yourself the opportunity to maybe look a little bad because you're walking during a marathon will cause you to reach the finish line faster than if you were just running the entire time.
Yeah. That's absolutely crazy. But I imagine that's exactly what people need. Is you need to, it's got to, and you got to do the perfect balance is then the trick of that, right? Like if you're walking all the time, you're not going to make it. But if you're running all the time, you're going to die before you get there. So you got to do the balance. If you're let's go back to your woodcutting analogy. If you're sharpening your axe, you're going to run out of axe before you're even done, and your trees are never going to come down. But if you're going to end up with a hammer if you do the other extreme. So you do have to balance, and then that's how you become the best version of yourself.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect point. Not letting your self-care become a stall tactic. Yeah. Maybe I need a nap, but do I need 3 naps today, or can I get it done with 1? Like understanding where the line is. Where am I avoiding work by self-care?
Yeah. Versus
when do I authentically need it? Like, am I feeling like this is pointless? Am I feeling like I'm ready to give up? Am I resigned about what I'm doing? And if I am, those are all really good signs that it's time to take a break, go for a walk, do some yoga, climb some rocks, whatever it takes for you to get back into that headspace where you're like actually excited to be taking on what you're taking on.
Yeah. And it's good for your brain too to do different contrasting activities, right? Where someone was talking about if you're doing a lot of I think maybe Jeff said this last week, where you have you're doing like a lot of analytical stuff like programming or something. That's something that's using the left side of your brain, I guess, or whatever side. And then you take a break from that after a couple hours and you go draw. You go do something more creative. It uses a different part of your brain, gives your other one some time to relax. I remember learning to cook. If you want to whip eggs really quickly, you beat the eggs with your dominant hand, and then when that gets tired, you switch to your non-dominant hand. You keep switching back and forth until it's done. Versus if you just keep going with your dominant hand, you're just gonna wear out your arm and you'll never make it.
Yeah, and you see this at like the highest levels of performance too. Like Jim Lee is a really well-known artist in the comic book industry. Like that guy he can like I've literally seen this in his stream. He can literally draw better than me with a Kleenex than I can if you gave me like 2 hours and like all the tools that I could possibly get my hands on.
You say Kleenex?
Like, Kleenex. He's brilliant with Kleenex. It's unreal, right?
You mean tissue?
And yeah, like
I'm hearing Kleenex. Okay, Kleenex is okay. Wow.
Yeah, and he'll just put ink on it, and like he creates like Batman using that, and it looks good. Like it's ridiculous, but like as he's drawing, like he'll take time and draw like little weird doodles off to the side. He'll do like small anatomy things, and like people are like, "Why are you doing that? That's a waste of time." And he's always talking about how like it's like kind of a long cut, but kind of a shortcut. Like he's doing the thing that we consider normally to be distract, but he's doing it so that he can refocus and do good work.
Yeah, and that's a great example then for doing that. Yeah. Got to give yourself time to breathe. If you're only doing the one thing, you got to see the whole picture too. And that's another trick is if you're only doing what your goal says you should be doing, it's not enough. You gotta do the whole thing within context. and keep it all going, keep it all fresh.
Give an example for that. Like, I think I got a little bit lost with that.
Okay. Like what you're saying, where you gotta let your mind flow, and if you are only focused on your one goal, your brain is gonna burn out on that one thing. So the side doodles and everything in his artwork is obviously useful, and I like what you said, how it's a long cut but it's a shortcut.
Got it. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's feeling pretty complete for me, man. Do you feel like there's anything else that like we didn't get a chance to cover off on?
No, I think that's pretty good for this week. We're 5 minutes over time anyway, so this is good. We can stop here. The last slide says thanks for watching. I want to say for this week, analyze how you're getting in your own way, and see if start making steps, either talking to people or analyzing how you can get out of your slumps. Keep yourself motivated, and also when you're doing your goal, list a couple things that you can do on the side, that you can, like drawing doodles and stuff. Keep yourself motivated on your goal by giving yourself a little bit of extra tasks to do, little side tasks to keep yourself motivated. Rob, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that's showing up for me is once you notice where the breakdowns are happening, making sure that there's a structure put in place. Like, okay, well, when I'm running, sometimes I get pain in my knee. And I know I get pain in my knee because I don't stretch. So now before I run, I stretch for about 10-15 minutes. And if I don't, my girlfriend gets to slap me in the face. You know, like it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, we're good.
Done.
And now I'm going to stretch every single time.
Did you stretch today?
And
yes.
remembering. Yeah, and it's remembering too that like just understanding it, just having the information is good, but it's not going to make the difference. It is putting it into action. So even if you have resistance, just pushing against that resistance a little bit with your next step until it becomes natural, and then you don't have to fight it anymore, and you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Man, that's good. I think that'll do it for this week. Same time next week, or sometime on the weekend next week, and we'll try to get a better schedule anyway on this, for your sake and our sakes. So, anyway, thanks for watching. We will see you guys next time. See ya.
Bye.